Olá, alunos do Além do Direito, olá, estudantes concurseiros, futuros mestres e mestras, doutores e doutoras. Como eu já divulguei para vocês, eu estou aqui na Itália fazendo doutorado sanduíche na Universidade de Macerata. E essa semana eu vou ter que me apresentar para o Departamento de História do Direito. Então, eu já tinha mencionado lá no Stories do Instagram que eu ia fazer com que vocês fossem meus espectadores. Fiquem à vontade para fazer qualquer crítica, sugestão, contribuição, indicação bibliográfica sobre o meu trabalho. Eu resolvi fazer isso, fazer essa apresentação gravada e não ao vivo, porque eu vou me apresentar em inglês. Então, como isso é um treinamento para mim, eu vou treinar em inglês. E aí, como se fosse ao vivo, não ia dar para o YouTube fazer a tradução simultânea. Mas como eu vou gravar e como eu vou fazer o upload, quando vocês forem assistir, vocês já podem colocar a legenda. Tá bom? Então eu vou iniciar agora. Já convido vocês para me seguir também lá no YouTube, @Prof. Daniele Maia, onde eu fico divulgando com mais o meu cotidiano, com mais ênfase aqui pelo YouTube. Eu, infelizmente, estou um pouco atrasada nas minhas postagens semanais, como eu costumava fazer, mas em breve voltarei. Então, fiquem ligados para quem gosta de conteúdo ali de direito penal, criminologia, direitos humanos, sistema interamericano ou até de planos de saúde. Aqui você encontra tudo isso. Então, já agradeço quem tem a paciência de me ouvir, quem tem vontade de descobrir como é a minha pesquisa, e vou iniciar a minha apresentação em inglês. Vou fazer exatamente como eu farei na hora, então vou iniciar fazendo os agradecimentos, que de praxe é assim que a gente começa a se apresentar, agradecendo a nossa audiência, agradecendo o nosso público, depois a gente vai e continua na sequência. Então, eu vou compartilhar aqui com vocês o PDF que eu fiz para apresentar, né? Então, vamos lá. Hi, everybody. I'm Daniele Maia, and I'm very grateful that you are here listening to me and to my presentation. I'm very sure that you will contribute a great deal with my work. I do a PhD, an interdisciplinary PhD in law and sociology. So my supervisor is sociologist, is not a lawyer like me, and I intend to do interdisciplinary work research. So I'm studying Francisco Campos and his authoritarian ideas and how they influence the Brazilian penal code. So in the next slide, you can see the research I did in two platforms. In the Catálogo CAPES is a Brazilian institution for research and foment research, and it's involved with all kinds of research in Brazil. Also is with a CAPES scholarship that I'm here in Italy. And the other platform that I used is the National Library of Digitalized Works. It's not paper works or articles, but only thesis and master dissertation. So as you can see in the image, the interest about Francisco Campos grew in time. And in the last 10, 50 years, it grew a lot, but it started to grow after our last dictatorship, the military dictatorship that lasted during 1964 and 1988. And here you can see what I found in the literature. I read a lot of works about Campos, and I found these 4 topics the better way to summarize what I have read. So the first topic that appeared in the works were the relationship between Francisco Campos and Carl Schmitt. So this is not interest to my work in the penal field, but it appeared in a lot of research that I read. The second and third one, they are connected. It's the democracia substancial. I translated it like substantial democracy, but this is a concept of Campos. He wrote about it. He wrote that he wanna build in Brazil a national state with a real democracy that for him was the substantial democracy that was different from the democracy, the liberal democracy that we were used to know at that time. And this democracy was based on the education and the unreasonableness of the population of the masses. He thought the population was not smart enough, educated enough to elect his own leader. And as they needed that help, they needed like a father, someone who leads them to think and to choose what's best in their society. And the fourth topic is the relationship between Campos and authoritarian ideas. About it, I made a framework, and in this framework, you can see a lot of separation between topics inside the authoritarian ideas. The first one is the totalitarianism, and none of the researchers classified Campos in the authoritarianism. Then you have fascism, and the author who classified him in it, and this other classification, the pensamento autoritário brasileiro, it's the intellectual Brazilian authoritarianism thoughts, the intellectual that was fight for authoritarian ideas here in Brazil. You can imagine a great umbrella, and inside these umbrellas, a lot of intellectual, Campos, Oliveira Viana, Alberto Torres, Plínio Salgado, a lot of intellectuals that talked and wrote about authoritarian ideas, and these researchers put them all together in the same classification. And we have the constitutionalist approach. So we have Paulo Bonavides with the dictatorship constitutionalist approach. We have Luis José Filho with the authoritarian constitutionalist approach, and we have I forgot the name of the Rogério Dutra. He has an illiberal constitutionalist approach. This one is not important to my research from now on, but it was very important to me to see and know how these intellectuals, how these researchers talk and saw Campos and his writings. In this next page, I asked, who is Francisco Campos? And according to Jarbas Medeiros, a classic approach about Francisco Campos, one of the first Brazilian authors who wrote about Francisco Campos, he divided Campos into 3 periods of time. And these periods of time are it's a very common classification. It's very unanimously to classify Campos like that. So the first period of time is from 1940 to 1930, the Brazilian 1930 Revolution. This one, Campos was a student in the law school, and he drew attention to himself because of his speeches, because of things he was writing. And the second period of time is from 1937 to 1942, is the time I'm studying, is the time of Getúlio Vargas dictatorship. The Estado Novo is what we call it. And the last period, it's the period that Campos, it's out of politics. He's working for enterprises, lawyer. He didn't write much this time. And he only returns in 1964 to help write the first act of the Brazilian military dictatorship from 1964. And he died just after it, so he didn't participate very active in the second dictatorship, the military dictatorship. So for the second period, that's the one I'm studying, we have Campos as Minister of Education, as General Consul, and Minister of Justice for Getúlio Vargas. That's the period of time I'm studying from 1937 to 1942. The bibliography of Campos, his primary sources, are not very organized. So the main book of him, the one that I'm most based on. The one that I'm just based on, that I based my research, is this one, National State, o Estado Nacional. It's a collection did post-mortem after he died. It was published by the government and gathered together speeches and articles and papers he wrote along his life, the most important one, and that's the one I had used the most. This one are books that Francisco Campos wrote, his primary sources. It's in Portuguese, but it's just for you to see how huge was his production. His nickname was Francisco Science, because he was a very intelligent man and wrote about very, very different things. So you can see he wrote about the indoctrination of the population. He wrote about the organization of the state, wrote about property and civil law. He wrote about education and culture. He wrote about poetry and tax law, business law, and about Brazilian justice system. So he wrote about a lot of things, but he didn't write about criminal or penal law. The only thing we write was the explanatory statement for Brazilian 1904 Penal Code. But even this, the authors and the researchers have doubts that if it wasn't really him who wrote it. Maybe it was another person who wrote it by hand and he just signed it. So the legislative changes of this period, there was a lot of legislative changes, but these ones are the most important for my research. So it's only these ones that I put here, but there's more. So the Authoritarian Constitution for 1937, the Civil Procedure Code for 39, the Penal Code, the Procedure Penal Code, the Popular Economy Law, the Jury, the National Security Law, and the Minor Offenses Law. This one is very important to me because I think I will work through it to study campus. And just for you to understand, it has two crimes that I want to exemplify for you to understand how this law is important, the minor offense law, that are into effect until today. One of the first crimes is the crime of poverty, homeless, is the crime that is asking for money in the street. This was a crime that time. It's not anymore, but it was. And the second one is not anymore a crime, but it was that time, is the crime that, I don't know how to translate, the crime of doing nothing. So if the person doesn't work and doesn't study and it's all day in the street doing nothing, so that was a crime. That was a minor crime, a minor offense that was not included in the penal code, but in a separate legislation. So to talk about Brazilian penal system and Italian penal system, I could find these works that do a comparison between them. So we have this first work from Mariana that she talks about the drafting of the penal code, and the second one talks about the drafting of the procedure penal code. And also we have a work about popular economy law. On the other side, we have works about history law and about codification and technification, and we have works about the National Security Code and political crimes in Brazil. This last one by Diego Nunes, that's a very important professor to me. In Brazil, we have a qualification process that we do in the middle of the PhD, and I just did mine a month ago, and Diego Nunes was one of the professors who evaluated me. And here is my research topics and research problem and purpose. And maybe I will change it a little bit because Diego Nunes have made a lot of suggestions to me during my qualification, and I'm still thinking about it and what I will change and what I'm not going to change. So for now, my research topic is the influence of Francisco Campos' authoritarian ideas. And by authoritarian ideas, I mean the national state, that book I talked about, and in the drafting of the Brazilian minor offense law. And my research problem is the Italian Technical Legal School and how it influenced the Francisco Campos idea and to what extent they were present in the Brazilian minor offense law. And my research proposal is to analyze the influence of the Italian Technical Legal School in the Brazilian penal system and in Francisco Campos' authoritarian ideas. And I also have the purpose to investigate how this technical legal school influenced the decision to not put the minor offense crimes inside the penal code, but in a separate legislation. And I have as hypothesis that Francisco Campos wanted to create a brand new penal system in Brazil. And this penal system was the one who could support his authoritarian ideas of a national state and a substantial democracy. And I have the hypothesis that Campos was inspired for the Italian technical code. He was not trying to do the same thing as the Rocco did, but he was inspired by his idea. That's my hypothesis. And as for methodology, I'm doing a qualitative research with an interdisciplinary approach by the literature review on criminal law, sociology, history of sociology of law, and history of law. And I want to do a quantitative approach as well. I'm not sure how I would do that, but I want to do a research that could gather some ideas, expressions, and says that I can find in Francisco Campos' primary source, and that I eventually could find in some papers or works about the Italian technical legal school that I could gather together and see maybe a pattern or a graphic that could show me that this was how they choose to indoctrinate the population, to put in the population the feeling that they had to have a very strict, a very strong penal system, so they could guarantee social security, peace inside the society. And that's what I wanted to find with the quantitative methodology, but I still don't know yet how I can do this. And that's it. Thank you for listening to me. I believe you could give me some very precious contribution on my work, and I'm very honored that you could take the time to listen to me. É isso, gente. Essa é a minha apresentação. Acabou que eu não quis interromper, porque eu estava gravando e eu queria ver quanto tempo eu ia levar, mas eu fiz um outro PDF. Esse está desatualizado. E aí eu já deixo aí umas dicas para vocês, né? Não é legal botar tanta coisa escrita assim, né? Eu vou remover aqui, que agora eu já terminei, e eu vou ver se eu consigo colocar o outro aqui, o meu novo. Deixa eu ver aqui, porque aí vocês podem ver as mudanças que eu fiz. Não sei por que não está salvo. Deixa eu salvar aqui. Não é legal a gente colocar num PDF uma escrita com tantas coisas, assim, um parágrafo escrito. Então, é legal a gente colocar alguns tópicos. Então, eu vou mostrar para vocês, se eu conseguir colocar aqui, né? A minha nova apresentação, deixa eu ver. Ela tem algumas poucas mudanças. Por exemplo, eu tinha posto no início Francisco Campos autoritarianismo. Mas autoritarismo é um conceito que tem um significado por si só. E Francisco Campos não necessariamente está dentro do autoritarismo, que é um conceito da Hannah Arendt. Então, eu troquei por authoritarian ideas. Essa foi uma mudança que não estava presente aqui. Deixa eu ver se eu tô com certo agora, se eu salvei o certo. Acho que esse é o certo. Outra coisa que eu tinha mudado é isso aqui, ó, esse framework que eu fiz. Eu coloquei menos tópicos, tá vendo? Eu juntei algumas coisas para ficar mais fácil de entender. Então, eu estava com errado na hora eu apresentei para não ter que interromper, mas esse é o certo. E eu também troquei aqui, ó. Eu botei mais uns tópicos, tá vendo? Em vez de uns textos corridos, principalmente aqui na minha metodologia. Eu acho que ficou mais claro agora. Bom, é isso. Muito obrigada a você que está assistindo. Deixo aí a dica do canal, né, aqui do Além do Direito, que tem bastante conteúdo sobre mestrado, sobre doutorado. Tem um e-book gratuito sobre como fazer um projeto de pesquisa, se você tiver interesse de baixar e ver como é, ver um pouquinho do meu trabalho. E me segue lá no Instagram, @Prof. Daniele Maia. Curte esse vídeo, manda para os seus amigos. Se você souber de alguém que estuda esse tema, eu vou ficar muito grata de você enviar esse vídeo e me colocar em contato com essa pessoa. Tá bom, gente? Um grande beijo para vocês e até o próximo vídeo. Tchau!